Good evening. Welcome to the November 16th, 2022 Finance Subcommittee of the Brookline School Committee. We're going to start with the minutes from our last meeting, our October meeting. Did people get those? I saw them. I don't know. Okay, so they were circulated earlier. I couldn't keep track.
They were.
Okay, thanks, Robin. I'll make a motion for the minutes. Andy or Suzanne? A second.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. Suzanne, how do you vote?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Next item on the agenda is the gift and grant acceptance. There was one gift, if I recall correctly. Sorry, my computer's having issues.
I think it was a $2,000 gift to the hockey.
Field
team.
hockey. Yep.
Field
was,
hockey.
Yep, so we'll do that one off of memory. There was no backup provided for that. Donna commented to me when I asked that this had come in as an online donation. Right, Donna, with a comment in the there's a comment box where they were directing it to. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. I just want to mention that while we're talking about, go ahead, Donna.
In the I had responded. You had asked in the email a question about.
I asked about how. Yeah. Did you? Well, you had what you theoretically thought it could be used for, not what it would be used for.
That's correct. I did contact the athletics department to see what it could be used for. Yes.
Right, but we don't know what it was used for. This brings up a broader question for me, which is something that I had discussed with the athletics director, and I think Linus and Anthony Meyer were on the email as well. This was about a month or two ago, about gifts to different athletic programs and booster programs, and particularly ensuring equity, particularly also where we have sports that are offered for both boys sports and girls sports, and ensuring equity of program support, where there is, for example, sometimes very robust booster programs for one of those programs, but not the other, and how to make sure that we're compliant with Title IX, which requires that there be equity in sports across programs. For example, that if boys basketball has, I'm just picking on boys basketball, not because this is not a true story, what I'm telling you, just an example, but that if, for example, the boys basketball program has a very robust booster program and gets a lot of gifts, that there needs to be equity also with the girls program to make sure that they are receiving the same kinds of supports. And so this is something that I know that Kyle Williams, who's the athletic director, wrote back right away to me and said this is something that's on their mind as well. So for my personal opinion, I am enthusiastic to accept the gift that was given to girls field hockey, and also enthusiastic to hear from staff over the next year or so about how to ensure that we're handling gifts with equity and also respecting donor intent. Hang on one second, Carolyn. I just want to see if anyone on the committee has any comments or thoughts on that.
So Mariah, so how is this gift to be used? They give it to the team, they give it to the coach, they give how? I don't understand how that actually works.
So I believe that there's an athletics gift account. I don't remember. Donna, where is this getting deposited to? My computer's melting down right now, so I can't see.
Yeah, it's actually the Brookline High School gift account. That's the account that's set up on the online donations.
So how do they, given that it was directed towards field hockey, who is the steward who maintains, who ensures that the gift was, those funds are spent for the purpose for which the donor intended?
I believe that would be Mr. Williams. So they, for instance, if they wanted to buy, make a purchase, they would submit a requisition in Munis, and then they would charge the high school gift account.
But how does he know that $2,000 came in for field hockey? And then how do we know that I'm making this up. Say there's now $10,000 in the account. How do we know that next week Anthony isn't going to see that there's $10,000 in the account and spend all 10,000 on something else, not realizing that there's a designated purpose,
Well, I
or
will,
that there's a
once-
restriction on $2,000 of the funds?
so I will send this memo to the high school and I will send it to athletics department as well as to Anthony, so that they know that money's designated for that purpose.
But how do we make sure in the accounting system that it gets adhered to as opposed to just being sent over? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, they should be tracking these. You know, as they come in, I would recommend doing requisitions as soon as possible, once they know what they want to purchase, so that the money gets spent on the specific donation.
But what happens if a donation comes in for $5,000 next month for SWS and SWS didn't know it was coming? And you know what I mean? Like, it's just, this feels complicated in a way that we need
Mhm.
to detangle.
So I think probably the question
Go ahead,
is
Linus.
to ask make that known, but then for us to actually find out how do they actually manage their account. So these are all great questions. But I
Yeah.
think without going down the conjecture slide here, let's just ask them, how do they manage an account where multiple donations are coming in that are earmarked for different things?
I mean, it comes to this risk of accepting funds that are restricted. But anyway, go ahead, Carolyn.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious. This is really interesting. And I'm guessing from the fact that Kyle responded to your email concern. So Title IX covers gifts, even though that's not sort of, Title IX isn't just what the district provides.
Correct. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for raising that, Mariah.
Yeah, sure. It's the district's responsibility to ensure equity independent of fund origin. Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna move acceptance of the gift and thank you to our donor, with the proviso that will staff go back and ensure that there is a way to, that if there isn't already a plan to spend the funds, like basically not immediately, but in the very near future, that there'll be some sort of tag put on the account to address the fund restriction. Is that reasonable? Donna or Linus?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna make that motion.
I'll
Are you
second.
seconding? Thank
Yeah.
you. How do you vote, Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Just one thought on this, Donna, is in the future, maybe when we have gifts that have a designated purpose, that we don't throw them into a general gift account, but we have them in some sort of like designated gifts placeholder thing, and that way there isn't money spent. I don't know. That's just one thought I have. The next is the grants. So we were given, I'm going to try and pull that one up. There was, I think, 5 or 6 grants. Sorry, this computer's really slow.
Federal and state grants.
Yeah, there was,
In a Metco grant.
yep, there was several federal grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and also Metco. So the Title 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know if everybody saw, but I just want to call out I found it really handy. The first pages 2 through 5 of the document, which were a summary of what the funds were going to be used for and how that sort of the summary of the overall goals of the program, and then a summary of how the funds are going to be used in PSP. And it was really helpful, I thought, to, that's something new we added last month. And it's really helpful to have that summary as opposed to just wading through hundreds of pages of grant documentation. And so the you can see the different things that are listed there. So Title I, and that's targeted towards specific programs, and Lincoln and Ruffin Ridley are the two schools at which Title I can be expended, I believe, and possibly also at the high school. And then Title II has to do, the funding there is tied to some of the broader teaching and learning activities. Title III around English language learning, and you can see the activities there are very much tied to that. And then 4 is, again, about student high quality educational experience. And that's, so there's more of the middle school review funded there. And then the METCO one, it's called METCO PAC. And I asked earlier today what PAC stood for, because I did not know what that stood for. And now I can't remember what it stood for, but basically what it means is it's last year's last FY22 funds that METCO that were not expended in FY22, and METCO gets the opportunity to redistribute those. So basically anyone who didn't spend their money, it goes back to METCO, and METCO can redistribute it in FY23. And so we received additional monies from METCO that weren't expended in 22. They got redistributed in 23. And so that's why you can see the 4 things there about an equity review, the HBCU initiative, funding for the trust partnership, and then additional transportation costs. So any questions from the subcommittee on the grants?
So for METCO, do we apply for those grants? I mean, or they gave us money. I'm not sure how that comes to be that we get that money. It was a substantial amount of money.
I don't remember, Donna, do you know the answer, whether they give it to us or whether we asked for those specific funds?
I believe the district still has to have a plan for how those funds are going to be spent.
But did we submit the
December.
proposal? Did we submit a proposal before the monies were allocated, or did they allocate the monies and then we provided a spending plan?
I believe.
So those monies are what wasn't spent. So METCO headquarters then says you have an additional opportunity to expend those funds. So it's essentially.
Oh, so they don't recollect all of them. It's just our money from last year that we didn't spend. Okay.
Oh,
Right. So in the documents, it shows the targeted PAC allocations per town, and Brookline was $434,095.
Andy?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Title IIA will be supporting a world language review and a key literacy review. So just excited that those are going forward with support for these title grants.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move favorable action on the grants. Can I get a second? Andy, thank you. Andy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so that is the first couple items on the agenda. And the next, I think the last
One
thing.
question
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
one of the grants. I'm sorry, and I just had it up, and of course it went away here. And the Title IIA, there's something about private school contract with facts. What is that?
Yeah. So I asked about that earlier today
Oh,
too.
good.
Yes, and because I think that actually also appears under Title III as well. And let
Oh,
me
really?
let me find the email that so Kelly Durgan answered that email, and let me find the answer to it. Hang on one second.
It's not in 3. I'm looking in 3.
So this is the answer. Facts Education Solutions is a third-party vendor that we partner with in order to help the private schools spend their equitable share of federal funds. The district cannot give funds directly to the schools, therefore all purchases must be approved and made through the districts. Facts helps facilitate their individual spending, and then they invoice us. This also allows the private schools to pool their resources with funds they may receive through another district in order to get the most out of allocations. So basically, they're like the middleman for
Are these the
allocation.
766 schools? Is it, special ed schools, or is it independent schools? I don't understand.
I understood that it was independent schools. And it is in number 3 because they do, I thought it was tutoring. It was maybe fax tutoring or something like that. anyways, so it has to do with the relationship. I understood it to be I assumed it was the in-town schools, but maybe it's schools that students are going to. Do you know, Linus or Donna? Which are the schools that it goes to?
No.
No,
And
okay.
how much?
You can see how much in the budget detail. It's in the,
Oh, yeah, okay. I'll
yeah, I
follow
can,
up. Never mind,
okay.
don't take time. Don't take
It's
time.
not, I don't think it's much though. I think it was like maybe $12,000 or something gets allocated. Anyway,
Okay.
okay, so I'm gonna pull up the budget book outline that you all hopefully got. And so what I did was, can you see this?
No, yes.
Yes, okay.
Mhm.
What I did was I took last year's budget book and I did a little shuffling on it. And almost all of this was in the budget book last year. There's a couple of things that are new and we can talk through them. What I want to propose though is, I mean, I guess this is, I should say, this is just a proposal. I want us to go through it and then talk about it and think about what's missing, what we don't need. There was actually some things that were in last year's budget that I've already cut out of this, in my opinion. Like there was a glossary. So I want, because again, we're thinking about this as an informational document, but also this is going to get printed out. And I want to be thoughtful about that. And especially for this next year, where I presume we're going to be in an override scenario. The book might be even bigger than usual if we have to produce sort of dueling versions of a budget. And so how we're thoughtful about what goes in here. So I'm just going to sort of review it quickly the way I was thinking about it, and then we can open it all up for conversation. So there's a table of contents, cover and table of contents, a joint letter from Linus and David as chair. The letter should discuss the override. Then the very first section is the operating budget for next year. The budget guidelines and calendar would start that off. We already voted those at the last meeting, and those were accepted and adopted by the full school committee at the 2 school committee meetings ago, I think. Then we would have a table. This is sort of a big deal table, which we didn't quite do as detailed last year. So it'd be a table of all funds, revenues, and budget. So it would be retrospective actual, then our current for FY23, and then the forecast budget for the future. So it's almost like that the tables that we got from Ruth for FY22 close, but we would have that for 2021, 23, 24 through 28. So we would have a sort of historical of where things ended up on that one. Then
Could I just say something about that?
Yes.
There's samples of that. I happen to have the 2016 budget, and there's exactly the FY16 all funds budget summary, Public Schools of Brookline Superintendent's FY16 budget, but it goes back to 13-14 actual
Perfect.
percent of, all that.
Yep.
So it's a
That's
good
great.
thing to look at, to use.
That's great. Thank you to have that history. And then table of staffing, which we had created last year and I think was 1 year back. And so we would want to, again, so we would have the previous year. It might not go all the way back to FY20, but at least having the 21 and then the 22. Or I should say 21, 22, and then 23. And then forecasting that, but just basically carrying that same thing forward. And then some of the summary statistics, which can be derived from that, it would be nice. And then summary of notable changes to the budget. So this would be sort of like, this is like the big picture budget section. If you don't look anywhere else, this is how you get like a sense of what's going on. Then budget by school. Now, one of the things I did was last year, if you all recall, and this is very much my own thinking, but this is for the discussion of the group. Last year, if you remember, there was like a section on each school, and it mixed sort of like facts about the school and like school culture with the budget and the staffing. And I'm proposing this year that the budget portion of the school bit be separate, and that there be school information provided in section 9, but that we sort of keep the budget portion just budget for now. So again, we can discuss that. So then there would be, and this is again for each school, you'd see A through E. So basically enrollment and personnel, then their recent accomplishments, their budget priorities for their school, and then a multi-year budget for them, an all funds budget. And then a justification just explaining for the current year, if there's specifically any requests that are happening there, how those are reflected. Then for the high school last year, all of the high school, there was actually no budget for the high school last year presented, or maybe it was, I'm pretty sure there was no budget for the high school presented. All of these sections were over in the budget by department under OTL, and that didn't make any sense to me. So I wanted the high school budget to include all of the high school content and to have it actually be presented as a school. So, and then also you can see that these were the programs that were listed separately under OTL last year. So it was English, math, science, social studies, world language, continuing in tech ed, and then ACE and SWS. I'm not even sure if that's all the programs at the high school that should be included, but that was what was in the budget last year. So, but just basically having the high school programming be described as part of the high school is my goal. Then once we get past the schools, going to the district curriculum or program areas, again, for each one, very similar to what you see over here. They'd have an org chart, but also just like in the schools, accomplishments, priorities, multi-year budget, justification. And then these are the programs that would apply to, or the curriculum areas. And these again are the same ones that appeared in last year's budget, but they would, but they were all sort of lumped together under Office of Teaching and Learning, and I'd like them to be called out as curriculum and program area. And then by district department, so a new section, similarly, again, same things, org chart, accomplishments, priorities, multi-year budget, justification for the next year. And then these are the sort of more administrative offices or cross-cutting offices that we would typically see. Then CIP. Last year we had, I think, just the active building project summaries, but I want us to include our actual CIP request that we submitted for FY24, and then the 6-year forecast that was developed and that was presented in Capital. That was really great work that got put together, and so it's really nice to be able to sort of formalize that and document it in our budget. And then the last section would be district information, so mission, vision, overall demographic data, student enrollment, sort of the big picture on this. Again, there would be enrollment by each school, but also we'd have like an overall enrollment discussion, including forecasts and so forth. And then some of those detailed school information pages, the map, school committee blurb, senior leadership blurb, and then links to anything else. And then just the highlighted sections, like in the paper copy, the highlighted sections, there would actually be paper like tabs for the different highlighted sections, so you could find those in the budget book more easily. So this is my suggestion, but it's certainly not written in stone in any way. This is very much a draft for proposal, and I would open it up to comments. Andy.
Yeah, could I ask about item 4D, the table of staffing? What exactly you have in mind for that? So one of my favorite documents from last year, I don't think it was in the budget book, but it was a breakdown of staffing sort of that we received, I think, in March.
Yeah,
after the budget book
that's the
came out.
one.
That's the one. Okay, great.
Yes.
Because I came into this meeting basically wanting that to be in the budget book.
Yes.
So if that's what you have in mind, excellent.
That's exactly,
okay.
It says use categories we developed in last year's table. So basically like make that thing go forward.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Other comments, questions? Feel free to, Helen, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would highly recommend using some of the prototypes that are in the 2016 budget, because it has the staffing and projected staffing, by FTEs. It has a lot of those charts done up in a nice way and very understandable. So I assume it's in other years too, but I happen to have 2016, and it has a lot of what you're asking for. The other thing that it does have too, when on different budgets, there's sort of a description, description of what it is, their accomplishments, and a budget statement for the year. I don't know if that becomes too much.
What's
in
a
all of
budget
this.
statement? Is that the
Well, for
justification?
instance, this is, no, that's the one I'm looking at doesn't work, but hold on, I'll find one.
Well, we can look later and see. I think it's a great idea to go back to look at some of the historical ways that
Yeah,
we
because there
presented
may
data.
be some ideas here that, I mean, there may be, it's a big book. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure we want to do it this big, but there may be some things that aren't, really understandable. And so, for instance, the budget statement for Metco was the FY15 budget is level funded in the governor's budget. This will reduce purchasing power, and an estimate of 30,000 has been appropriated in the grant contingency. That sort of thing.
Mm.
I'm
Okay.
not sure if we need it or not, but I think it'd be good. I have it here. I can share it with you, Mariah, if you want.
You have what?
I have that budget book here, so
I can
share
find it online. I think we have a PDF online.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Suzanne?
Yeah, thanks. So when we talked, I think last year, budget by school, those pages are very helpful. But then speaking to an administrator this fall, she was talking about the money she had for professional development and kind of the different places it came from. And I'm wondering if that will be in, I'm not sure that was in that last year on that page. And she got money from different places. So it came from, OTL, and it came from some grants, and so I mean, it's not clear, but it'd be really helpful if they knew what that kind of budget would be for them, if each building administrator. So I don't know where that goes, but it would be helpful if it were there.
Well, the budget by school is the budget actually allocated to the school. And
Yeah.
I think that there's small amounts for that, but a couple of years ago, we tried to pull together the PD under OTL
Yeah.
to help encourage multi-school activities and so forth. I think it's a slightly different question of where the money is versus how the book is structured, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Any other comments you want to make on the book?
No, I mean, there's a lot of information here. Is this what Warren Article 37 is looking to look at? What are they looking for?
No, that's to hire a consultant.
Okay.
But I will say that this book, I mean, and to the extent that PSB has been active in increasing transparency around the budget and trying to make sure that the information is readily available for people to be able to understand what's going on in our budgets. This is another example of how we've been trying to increase transparency.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the fact that the deputy superintendent position is vacant for now. And so are staff confident that within the time frame that we have and the staffing that we have, that all of this information can be pulled together and broken down in the way that is envisioned here? And if not, then, where can we simplify?
Yeah. Linus, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I started typing a message, then I delete, and I type a message and then I delete. So to talk about this very thing that you bring up, Andy. So I want to check in with Ruth because I have her pulled off full time to work on the budget book, and she certainly understands the standard budget and the override budget development process also. But I'm also wanting her to look at this because there have been some changes at DESE level in terms of aligning our chart of accounts and making sure that we are coding, the two broad categories are central office and schools. So what I want to make sure is what so let me say this, the outline here, I think is excellent. And the information that we want to extract out of here is where we want to be. But I want to make sure that we're not adding in multiple additional layers into what she's having to build to align our budget with DESI regulations. So that's sort of my only piece there. So and that's the way I'm thinking about your question, Andy, is through that lens. So I want her to take a look at it as well and see what the best of and how we can continue to make this an iterative process. I don't think it would be a big lift, but I also want to make sure that some of the breakouts that we may be accustomed to that may not be where budgets need to roll in terms of the DESI alignment. So that's the part I want to check.
I just want to highlight the one thing you said, Linus, which is that Ruth is leading the budget development. So even though the deputy superintendent role is vacant, there is someone who's leading budget development. Just emphasize that bit of things.
And and this isn't part of the agenda, but I'm also bringing on an additional part-time business administrator while we still search for the deputy, so that we can split some of the office functions up to make sure that we're hitting all of our marks, exceeding those targets.
Thanks. Other comments from other members of school committee or members of advisory or anyone else? If you raise your hand, because I can't raise your virtual hand because I can't see.
Yeah, Mariah, it's Suzanne.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know we've had this, I don't want to say tension, but this division of labor here in terms of curriculum programs and how they assign staff to schools and what our schools think they may need. So, under 6, you have for, K-8 ELA, K-8 math. And sometimes they're the ones who are dictating to the schools what they will have. And I'm wondering how it could be the other way around. The schools kind of tell the curriculum areas what they need. So anyway, it's just something I'm thinking about.
Carolyn?
Thanks. Sorry, just a curiosity question again. SWS is like a separate funding. I don't want to take people's time, but I'm literally curious. And my daughter's in SWS. Love it. Best thing at the high school, but I'm just curious.
Well, that's part of my, I will say that generally my question is, when we looked at some of the budgets for some of these programs last year, they were very granular. Like I can't remember, but SWS might be one of them where maybe the budget said $35,000. And it's like, well, should we be calling out that versus some of these other things? It's a little bit like, should we just be calling it, or should we be having the high school have a budget and then it has its FTEs, and then there's maybe something that says like there's a small breakdown of curriculum by these sub programs. Like that's kind of, I agree that presenting it logically as opposed to like, even if it has its own account code, do we really want to present it as its own account code, or do we want to present it as integrated into a high school? Just like, and again, ACE and SWS are called out here, but there are other special programs at the high school, and like, why aren't, like, how granular do we want to get? Like, we have an account for the, I don't know, there's so many different accounts I could call out, and does it make sense to present them in the budget book? So I'm just sort of piling on to what you're saying of like being thoughtful about how we present what happens at the high school and why we would call out one particular program versus another one when they're really part of a larger staff and a larger vision.
I think, can I say something?
Go ahead, Helen.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, Helen, go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead, Helen.
Okay, I think, I can make a case either way. If we wanted to understand where we're spending the money, it is good to break it out. For instance, career and technology education, understanding what they're doing. Do they have new programs, sorts of things, their FTEs.
Just to be clear, I wasn't talking necessarily about those first 6, but on some of the other programs, not,
Okay.
yeah.
And ACE and SWS are somewhat separate programs. I think it is. I mean, oh, I don't know.
But then there's other programs, and do we call those ones out too? It's just sort of a question, like
That's
how do
true,
we
too.
present what happens at the high school, which is very complicated. Catherine, I'm going to skip you to go to Suzanne, who's on the committee, and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, thanks. I think SWS in their budget would suggest that they actually don't have much additional cost. I mean, they have costs, but they try to do it within the high school budget. Do you know what I mean? It's there.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find the page. Keep talking, and I'll find
Yeah,
the
well,
page.
so, I don't know, but maybe something like the Winship House has its own budget. I don't know, but SWS likes to say that they don't cost additional money.
So that's right. It's $10,000. So like, what is the point of having a whole budget page for $10,000? Does that make sense as opposed to having it integrated within the broader high school?
Right, that
programming.
was just what I was trying
Yeah.
to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe Winship House has its own budget because
Winthrop House.
Yeah, Winthrop.
I'm sorry, Winthrop House, yeah. I don't know, I'm just saying it might, because it's slightly more involved.
I think
So
that would be
that's-
under special ed. Where is special ed actually here?
It is not under here.
Oh.
And it is interesting because actually last year, this is another question I have to this point. Where is it? There's a lot of costs that are under student services. And it's not, there was out of district here, but the other costs was not clear to me which ones were which. So it is interesting to think about how special education is presented in this budget. I'm just going to put a comment.
I think it's a giant in the room, where,
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more than SWS, the costs, and it should be.
Yep.
It should be listed separately, I think. So we understand it.
Yep. And we had that in the staffing thing, the staffing structure from last year, but it wasn't necessarily presented in the budget that way. So that's a great point. Catherine?
I put my hand down, but I will say, coming from the outside, it would be helpful to understand, to have a page that were the programs. So you're talking about at the high school, instead of a full page, a table, these programs, and maybe organized by category, if there were categories that they could be filtered into.
Yeah.
And then some common FTEs. Supplies could be total. I don't think it's interesting to have supplies for a single program. I mean, unless any program's using a lot.
Yeah,
There's
I mean, I
something
think the details of each page are a little bit still to be worked through, but yes, I agree with you that it should include some breakdown of detail. Yeah, at the high school level. Because there's so much happening. That's like a whole city of activity. I think Carolyn likes to say, and it's true, that our high school is bigger than many universities. So
it's very large.
Yeah.
But something, for example, like supplies isn't so interesting on a program by program basis, but it is sort of interesting on an overall basis. And then somebody might ask a specific program, and that might be interesting to have as backup. But there's some things that are just the kind of things people ask about.
Yeah. I'll show you that last year, you can see on this page that there was a break. You can see, so this one's not a good example because it only has, well, just to give this as one, this was health and wellness last year. And so they separately broke down the non-personnel costs by health and then by phys ed. So you can see that you could have, for example, some detail within, like, for example, you could have this level of detail plus perhaps the personnel for each one of the areas at the high school, to your point. And maybe have it be in a one big table instead of separate tables. Cliff, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So I was just going to suggest, and maybe what Catherine, you were just talking about would solve this issue anyway. But if you have something like SWS, instead of having a separate page for it, why don't you just come up with a policy that basically says you're only going to have separate pages for individual programs to the extent that the budget impact is greater than X. Because for $10,000 or $35,000, it, you run the risk of actually giving people too much to look at.
Yeah.
So they can get lost in the trees for the forest. So
No, I agree with that. It makes it harder for people to understand what's going on when you give them too much information. Then there's like every page is treated equally when they're not all equal pages. So yeah, I agree. Carolyn, and then we'll go to you, Helen.
Thanks. Again, an outsider question. I have last year somewhere on my desktop. I didn't pull it up. And I'm remembering that I recently looked at it to try to better understand BEEP, and was in my tiny brain, was not able it left me with questions. So just putting that out there, I think if there's a way to, I don't know, clarify for the public, the BEEP stuff. Thank you. Just
When you
put
say
that out there.
clarify for public the BEEP stuff, what do you mean? Like, what were you trying to figure out that you couldn't figure out, so we can clarify that stuff?
I'm gonna have to remember. I mean, it was just like this moment where something came through my mind, and then I looked, and part of it is a revolving fund.
Yeah.
Or, so I guess I was trying to figure out, like, okay, my understanding of, like, I know the municipal golf course is a revolving fund, and like that's it. There's nothing comes in or out from that revolving fund. But my sense from looking at this BEEP stuff was that some of it is a revolving fund, and then some investment also comes from the overall
ESB.
school budget. And so I didn't, maybe that's
So
just a
part of
policy
this,
question, but I didn't understand it.
well, last year, I'll tell you, it was very confusing, and I won't pull it up right now because the budget that was presented was just the town portion. So for example, it showed base having like, I don't know, $5,000 or something like that. Like it was like, or like a zero budget, but really base has a large and thriving program. And so one of the things that wasn't implementable because of complexity for last year, but we requested for this year, is to have these budgets presented as all funds. So for example, for BEEP, it would actually show the entire, not just the portion of it that the town pays for, but the whole thing. For base, it would show the portion that comes from the revolving fund as well. For all the programs, we would have sort of the entire, the all funds view into it to help get at what you're saying.
But it would be important, if I could just
Yeah,
add to that,
go
I
ahead.
think it would be important to understand why it is the funds come from different sources. The fact that we're required to provide education for kids with special ed, and we are required to pay for it. That's part of the law. And so, and then there's a part of it that because we believe in an inclusive setting with typically developing students, we also charge for part of it. So it's a complicated piece that maybe can be talked about somewhat in a short paragraph to explain why it is the way it is.
And there's a short paragraph in this year's budget too, but it's hard to process all of it.
Right. So I
Okay,
had-
Helen, you had your hand up. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I had another thing that I think would be helpful, and I'm not sure if I see it here or not. So if it's here, just let me know. What would be interesting is to have a chart on the town school partnership allocations over the last 5 years and the percentage increases or the last whatever, how many years. I mean, there's a page in this 2016 one that shows that the appropriation from 15 to 16 went up 10.9%. So I think something similar
So
to that.
the table of all funds is revenues and budget. So it would show the increase in each revenue as well, not just, it will show that there.
It'll show the town school partnership and the,
It'll show how much
also-
by town school partnership, you mean the town contribution to the PSB budget, right?
correct, the appropriation, right? And then there's personnel benefits and then the building department expenses was included in this. It's on page 346 of, but it could be expanded a bit even. I think to just give a sense of the history of the contributions and where, so people understand.
Thanks. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could go back to the issue of how to present BEEP in the budget book. So I agree with Helen about the need for that explanation. I'm wondering, is it the case that for every FTE in BEEP, like we can just put our finger on, is this one being funded by the revolving fund? Is this one being funded from our operating budget? Because I think that, once we get down to giving numbers, like that's the important number to be giving, right? And the breakdown and which categories, which roles are funded from revolving, which roles are funded by operating.
Some are funded and split, but yes,
but
there's like an algorithm you can apply.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that would be the most important thing to state about BEEP once we get past the justification for the way it's set up the way it is.
Okay. Catherine, is your hand up?
First, I don't think anyone said this, but thank you for doing this, Mariah. And then second, since the town seems to be going in the direction of not sending printed reports to people, something that would make a huge difference would be to have something that is easily printable, that doesn't overuse toner. So on a white page, so there could be a version of the budget book, just black and white, that was super easy and fast to print. I think that would make a big difference. And it's not a priority. It just seems to be, if we're going down this direction, we would be saving people a lot of toner if we had black and white. And it's a gorgeous budget book. Both of them were last year. And this is super helpful to be thinking about now.
Well, I think it's really important because we were thinking about the printing of stuff. I mean, that was one of the things that was on my mind too, is how do we, and I think Linus, you reflected on this last year too, of not making we don't want to go back to like a tree killer like it was, maybe even in the one you're looking at, Helen, is a huge book. We want to keep it as streamlined as possible.
346 pages.
Yeah,
is a lot.
so I think we have a target. Last year, the target was was it 100 pages, and it came in at 120 in the end. So, and I think that you're right, Catherine, we want to be conscientious, not just about the number of pages in the trees, but also the ink, which is probably just as terrible for the environment and sort of environmental and other and economic reasons to not go crazy on that. Especially as you say, people are going to print this out. We print out some, but then it probably gets printed out by many more people. So I like that idea.
And then the one other thing I was going to say is that you don't have to put all the detail in the budget book. You can link to pages on your website for people who want to dig deeper. And
I
that
did put
might
down
actually-
here link to some other things because of that exact thing. I think there's a whole bunch of stuff we don't need to necessarily provide in the book.
But
someone might
online,
want-
it doesn't matter if it's in color or not.
Right, but the point is we don't need to reprint. For example, last year had the town school partnership from 1994 document in it. We don't need to print that out. We can just put a link to that kind of background material, and not
And that's actually easier anyway, because you can just find it and print that if you want it, or just refer to it
Yeah.
and search through it online for any particular information. Anyway, Mariah, thanks for the time. And this
Sure.
is a great idea.
Any other comments on this? Okay, so I think next steps are, we'll look at weaving some of these in, and Linus, you're gonna send this also to Ruth to get her feedback on it. We'll make some adjustments, and then this will be the sort of skeleton. Once those adjustments are made to move ahead with the sort of communications portion of the budget, even as staff are already working on budget development. That's been ongoing for a month or more.
Yep, and just to give folks an update of where we are on that, we're actually at the point where we've done the non-personnel collection of that information, both for the FY24 budget, as well as what we're calling enhancements for the potential in terms of override. And now we're looking, reviewing the personnel roster. So going through, making sure that we have every position accounted for in that sense. And so we're trying to make sure that we stick to a schedule so that we can remain on schedule. The other big issue is that we understand that with the change in governors, that the new governor has until I think March to release a budget. So we just need to keep that in mind as we work through the process. I think we've talked about this, I think maybe at full committee, but I just want to keep that in the forefront of folks' mind as well.
Thanks, Linus. Any other comments or questions from people? David, did you get the chance to send the budget guidelines to the town meeting members?
I have not done that quite yet, but I'll get to that very soon.
Thank you. It would be good because that was a helpful document. Okay. Anything else from the committee? We can end 35 minutes early. And don't get too used to this, because I promise it's going to get much worse very soon. We might as well take our free half hours when we can get them. Okay. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you. Bye.